2 years ago, I had a client who worked at a big three consulting firm. He was doing phenomenally well in his career, had been doing that for a couple of years, which essentially means that this guy was extremely good at finding solutions to complex business problems, figuring out how to implement these solutions, figuring out how to get other people to come on board to implement these solutions and help with it. But for some reason, he wasn't able to translate this success in his career and business life to his dating life. The funny thing here is that we would all expect consultants and people in similar professions such as lawyers and maybe to a lesser degree accountants or people that have these professions that are typically looked with high regards to, we would expect these guys to also be able to do phenomenally well in dating. The problem is that these guys, just like accountants, often run into this problem that they go on a date with a girl and after the date, things just somehow fizzle out. And it was the same with this guy. This guy was relatively good looking because amongst other things, he was also into endurance sports. So he had a decent physique, had a good sense of fashion, was relatively tall. So he would end up going on dates with girls that he met on dating apps. But every time he went on a date with a girl that he actually liked, at the latest on the second or third date, things would just fizzle out and the girls would kind of lose interest. And then he would get one of these texts where they tell him that, hey, I didn't feel the vibe, or I didn't feel the chemistry, or some would even straight up tell him that it was not what they expected it to be, so they're not going to see him again. And they're okay to just be friends, right? The words that really fucking hurt. Another thing is, if you're generally successful in life, if you tick the boxes everywhere else in your career, your business, fitness, health, all these other areas, but then there's this one area that you can't seem to figure out, it's pretty annoying, especially when there's a bunch of people that are way more stupid than you, that are way less successful than you, that figured it out. That's exactly how this guy felt. So he was relatively frustrated. And in today's video, what I'm going to do is I'll share with you the 3 biggest mistakes that I've seen men make that lead to exactly that scenario, where somebody who is successful on paper, who should be winning at life and winning at dating, is still fucking up his dating life. And honestly, if you can fix these 3 things in your dating life, you will see immediate results on it, not just something that's going to fix itself over the course of a couple of months, but literally, if you change this at your next date, you'll already see a big change. The first mistake I see guys in these top professions make is that they try to be a professional. We learned to be professional in every setting. We learned to win by showing how good we are, by showing our knowledge. And essentially what we do is we talk about everything that we're good at, everything that we care about, which is mostly the technical stuff from our work. Problem is that the moment a conversation goes technical, it very quickly goes boring. And a boring conversation is just that, it's boring. Now the thing is, women don't necessarily care about how smart you are. Sure, there's some women that are massively attracted to intelligent men, but most women need one more element, and that is how they feel around you. And when the core emotion that they feel is boredom, of course that's not going to lead anywhere. And I'll give you an actual fix that you can implement right away, but let's first talk about mistake number 2, because the fix that I'm about to share with you is going to fix both of those mistakes. The first mistake that we just talked about, being too professional and thereby be boring, and it's also going to fix the second mistake. The second mistake is very closely related to the first mistake, and it's also based on how professionals such as ourselves, I'm a lawyer by background, how we work, right? We're used to asking a lot of questions. So you essentially go on a date and then you become a detective. And by being a detective, again, you're going to bore her. You ask questions after question and she's going to give you an answer, but the interaction turns kind of stale and predictable. What you want to do on a date instead is have an interaction that triggers a cocktail of neurotransmitters. You want her to feel good, but you also want her to feel excitement. You want the whole interaction to be a bit dynamic, engaging. And by just asking questions, her answering that question, and then things moving on to the next question, you're never going to get there. Now, the reason we tend to ask questions is oftentimes because we don't really know what else to say. So we just ask a question and thereby put the pressure on the girl to make the interaction more interesting. So rather than doing that, I will give you specific things to say, which are actually questions, but questions that make it a lot more interesting. This will give you something you can ask that will not lead to a technical, boring interaction, but instead make the interaction fun and playful. So rather than just asking about her work, asking about her background, I want you to start mixing in hypothetical questions. Ask her, what would you do if? Or what would you do? What would you have done? So rather than just asking boring interview style questions about her background, where she's from, what she does for a living, what her role is at work, what she wants in her life, start asking questions with hypotheticals. Start asking her things like, what would you do if? Or what did you want to do as a child, right? Go into more hypothetical scenarios, which allows the whole interaction to take on a more playful vibe. By being more playful yourself, because you're asking a somewhat playful question, you're also allowing her to interject a little bit more playfulness in the interaction. By doing that, you're not just going to make the interaction more interesting, so going away from this being too technical, too boring, you also have something that you can actually ask, you have something that you can fall back on whenever you don't know what to ask. So next time you don't know what to talk about, you don't know how to make the interaction more interesting, just ask a hypothetical question. It's something that's very easy to memorize. It's something that, it's not like a line, it's just a concept. And one thing that I often hear when I suggest things like this is that people are scared, or at least a little bit afraid, that they might be seen as too silly or too irrational. And I want you to detach from that. In law, and the same applies, for example, for IT coding, everything follows a very specific path. Things follow from what came before, right? A sentence in law will always be followed by a thus, therefore. Same in code. If the sentence does not rely, or the code snippet does not refer to another part of the code, it's just not going to work. Because that's how it works in our professions, we think that that's also how it works in dating, and everything needs to make sense and follow from what we said before and be in this rational order. But unfortunately, that's the furthest from the truth, because the reality is that just like when you talk to your best friend in dating, things don't have to move in a straight line. Think about it. When you talk to your best friends, to your closest friends, what you essentially do is you talk about whatever topic you want to talk about, and then you might jump back to a topic you talked about 2 weeks ago, then you jump to a completely different topic, you talk about something you saw in a reel earlier, you talk about something that you saw on the news, then all of a sudden it makes you think of a funny story and you share that. And I want you to treat your date like you're talking to your best buddy. Don't treat her like somebody that you're just getting to know. Don't treat it like a job interview or like a work colleague. Treat the girl like she's your best buddy. And the same way you would talk to your best buddy, you're now going to talk to your girl. Ask her silly questions, right? Now, of course, ground it all in a real conversation. You can still ask her about her background. You can still ask her what she does for a living. You can still ask her if she's happy at work, but mix it in with some playful questions and light up the whole interaction. Be more memorable. Okay, so you fix the two first big problems. You're being less of a professional and you're being less of a detective. Let's fix the third element that I see a lot of guys do that is wrong, and it's kind of related to the first two, and that is just being too predictable. Again, if you're too predictable on a date, what will end up happening is that the girl gets bored. What you need in order for a date to move forward, in order for there to be a flirty vibe, is tension. Tension is what really creates this vibe between a man and a woman, where she's interested in having more things happen, something actually leading to where you want it to lead. The problem is when it's too predictable, it gets boring, the tension dies, and nothing's going to happen. So whenever you feel like you're a little too predictable, there is, again, a very easy fix for you to use. Every time she's asking you a question, your instinct as a professional is probably going to be to answer that question straightforward and honest, just like you would do at work. Because at work, showing right away how smart you are and how well versed you are in your profession, that's what you've been winning with. But in dating, you're actually going to win by not answering right away. By first answering with something that doesn't necessarily have to make sense. You just crack a joke. And I'll show you an example in a second of Chris Pratt doing this in an interview, where he's being asked about his newborn son and he's cracking a joke. But then after he's giving the real answer, and that's the key here. Whenever a girl asks you a question and you feel the interaction is too boring, just throw in some random answer that's completely made up, completely over the top ideally, so it's kind of obvious that it's a joke, And then you give her the real answer, right? So first you make her laugh, then you give her the real answer to make sure that she realizes, oh, this is just a joke and you're actually here to actually get to know each other and not just fuck around with her, right? I have one last thing that I want to add here. The great thing about making things more playful is not just that the interaction is less boring, but it's also that it's putting everything into a different context, right? Rather than this being a serious get to know each other, when you're being more playful, you're also giving the girl permission to be more playful herself. So the whole interaction, the whole dynamic between the two of you is going to become more playful, more lighthearted, more fun, and it's going to be a lot easier to make something happen, make your dates exciting, make your dates lead to something. You will have a lot more tension between the two of you. It will also make her more intrigued and interested in seeing you again for a later date. That's it now. I'll see you in my next video.